They hired us to move 412 graves. I remember that number. It stuck in me like a splinter. 412. That's what the contract said. That's what the state permit said. That's the number still sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere in Charleston, if anybody ever bothered to look. 412 people in the ground. We were supposed to lift them out, move them 6 miles down the road, and put them back, nice and clean, make room for a bypass. By the time we stopped digging, we'd pulled more than 6,000 bodies out of that hill. And every single one of them was lying on its side, facing the same direction. I need to say something before I go any further. I've never told anybody this, not my brother, not the counselor the union sent me to when I couldn't stop shaking, not my daughter. And I think I lost her somewhere in the middle of all this. She stopped calling. I don't blame her. I wouldn't call me either. I'm 61 years old. My hands don't work right anymore. They shake when I try to hold a coffee cup. They shake worse when I close my eyes, because closing my eyes puts me back on that hill, and my hands remember what they did there even when the rest of me is trying to forget. A man should put a thing down before he's too weak to carry it. So here it is, all of it, the way it happened. I'm not going to tell you my name. It doesn't matter. What matters is I ran heavy equipment for 38 years in West Virginia. Excavators, dozers, loaders, dirt and rock. That's what I knew. The last job I ever worked was Halford Hill. I wish I'd never driven up that road. I need to tell you about Halford, or none of this will make sense. The mill closed in '09. After that, the town just emptied. Slowly, the way a body bleeds out from a wound nobody can find. The young people left first, then the families, then everybody who could afford to go. What was left were people like me, too old to start over, too broke to leave, too stubborn to admit the place was already dead. When the state announced the bypass, it was the first real work any of us had seen in 15 years. 40 local hires, 8 months guaranteed. The kind of money that could save a house, save a marriage, keep the lights on through winter. I need you to hold on to that. I need you to understand what we were willing to do for that paycheck, because it's the only thing that explains what came later. Nobody on that crew was a bad man. We were just hungry, and the work happened to be the dead. I took the job for the money, same as everybody else. But there was another reason, and I'm going to tell you the truth about it because the other reason is the whole story. My mother was buried in Halford Hill Cemetery, row C, 3rd from the fence. Under a flat piece of granite I'd helped pick out when I was 26 years old. I remember standing in that funeral home, not knowing what the hell to say to anybody. I just stared at the stone and read the words I'd chosen like they belonged to someone else. Ruth. 1931 to 1989. That was everything I could fit her into. 2 dates and a name. When the relocation notice came in the mail, they send them to the families, the ones they can track down. I sat at my kitchen table, and I read it 3 times. The state was going to dig up my mother and move her, and the work would be performed by, that's the phrase they used, a licensed contractor. A licensed contractor. Some stranger with a backhoe who'd never heard her voice. I couldn't live with that. So I called the number on the letter, found out they were hiring operators, and I made sure I was on that crew for one reason, and one reason only. When the time came to dig up row C, 3rd from the fence, I wanted it to be my hands on the controls. Gentle, careful. The way I should have been with her when she was alive. I'd been a lot of things to my mother. Careful wasn't one of them. Not enough. Not when it counted. I figured this was the last chance I'd ever get. That's the man who drove up that hill the first morning. Just a tired son trying to do one decent thing before he ran out of time. I didn't know what was waiting under that dirt. I wish I never found out. The first week was fine. That's the part I keep coming back to, because fine is a word I can't use anymore without feeling sick. Everything was fine. The work was slow and sad and respectful, and I thought the worst part of the whole job was going to be the day I finally had to open my mother's grave. That's how small my fears were. That's how little I understood about what was underneath us. We had rules. You don't just scoop a grave out with a machine. There's a process. You take the top layers off with the excavator, nice and easy. The last 2 feet, you go in by hand, shovels and trowels, on your knees in the dirt. I remember the feel of that dirt, cool, even in June, and a smell like old basements, like something that hadn't been opened to the air in a long, long time. There was a woman on site whose job was to watch us, make sure we didn't cut corners, didn't break anything, didn't treat the dead like dirt. Her name was Dana Reyes, mid-30s, serious in a way that made you pay attention. She never said bodies, she said remains. And when she said it, you could tell she meant something by it. Like every set of bones was still a person to her. Dana walked every single grave before we touched it. She logged everything, the bones, the coffin hardware, the buttons, the small personal things that survived in the dirt, a ring, a coin, a pin. Each person went into a clean container, labeled, numbered, ready to go back in the ground at the new cemetery in the same order they'd been resting, by the book. Careful, decent. We did 60 graves that first week. I went home tired and sad, and I slept fine. No dreams, not yet. I should have known. When things feel that manageable, it's because you haven't hit the part that isn't. On the 8th day, we opened a grave belonging to a man named Albert Tasker, died 1903, and underneath his coffin, there was another one. Now that happens, I knew that. Old cemeteries get crowded, a wife gets buried on top of a husband, records get lost. 100 years later, you dig down and find 2 where you expected 1. Nobody panics over a double burial. Dana didn't panic. She marked it in her notes and told us to pull Albert out carefully so we could get to whatever was below. But it wasn't a coffin. It was a body, just a body, laid on its side in the bare dirt. No box, no hardware, no nails, no handles, no fabric. Nothing you'd put in a grave in 1903. Nothing you'd put in a grave in 1803 either. The bones were that deep tobacco brown that bone turns after a long, long time in the ground. The knees were pulled up tight to the chest, and it was lying on its side. I remember the way Dana went quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet, where someone's thinking. A different kind. The kind where the thinking has stopped and something else has started. She climbed down into that hole and knelt next to those bones. And she didn't say anything for what felt like a full minute. Then she said, and I'll never forget her voice, because it was the first time I heard it sound thin, "This shouldn't be here." I asked her what she meant. She said Halford was founded in 1841. The cemetery opened in 1844. There was no reason for a body like this to be underneath a man who died in 1903. No reason for it to be here at all. The position was wrong. The depth was wrong. The age of the bone was wrong. She took a sample, bagged it, labeled it, put it in her kit. And then she said something that should have made me walk off that hill and never come back. She said, "Don't mention this to the project manager. Not yet." That was the first time anybody told me to be quiet about what we were finding. It was not the last, and I should have known right then the moment someone tells you to keep a secret about the dead, you are already in trouble. The lab results came back 9 days later. Dana didn't tell the crew. She told me. Just me. I think she'd figured out by then that I was the one who'd take it seriously, and I think she needed to say it out loud to somebody, because the alternative was sitting alone with it, and she couldn't do that. She found me at my truck after the shift. She looked like she hadn't slept. She was holding the report in both hands, and her fingers were doing something I recognized, that small, tight grip people use when they're trying to keep their hands from shaking. 2,000 years. That's what the lab said. The body under Albert Tasker had been in the ground for about 2,000 years. 2,000. Under a cemetery that was 180 years old, in a valley where nobody was supposed to have lived before the 1830s, where the history books said there was nothing but trees. I didn't say anything. I just stood there with the report in my hands. The evening bugs were going loud in the trees, the way they do right before dark. The paper was shaking because my hands were shaking, and I was thinking not as a thought, more like a feeling, that something had just opened up under my feet, and I wasn't sure the ground was going to hold. But that's not the part that put ice in my blood. The part that scared me, the part that still scares me, right now, saying it out loud, is what we'd been finding while we waited on those lab results. We'd kept working. Other rows, other graves, other parts of the hill, and we'd found more of them, not in every grave, but a lot of them, under the Taskers, under the Hendersons, under the little Matthys children who all died in the same year, the diphtheria year, 1897. There were others, older, deeper. First you'd hit the coffin, then the bare burial, then in some places, a stone-lined pit with bones inside it, then deeper still, bones with no pit at all, just pressed into the earth like the dirt had grown around them, layer after layer after layer. The town's cemetery, the one we'd been hired to move, was just the top, just the newest skin on something that went down and down and down. I was standing at the edge of one of the deeper excavations, looking down at what we'd uncovered, and I felt something I'd never felt before on a job site. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like vertigo. Like the ground under my feet wasn't solid anymore. Like the hill I was standing on was hollow, and I was on a skin over something I couldn't see the bottom of. We weren't moving a cemetery. We'd cut the top off something, and we had no idea how deep it went. I asked Dana that night at my truck how far down she thought it continued. She didn't answer for a long time, and when she did, her voice sounded different, smaller, like she was trying to make herself take up less space in the dark. "Nobody's ever dug up a whole hill before," she said. "Nobody's ever found out." The bypass was going to take the top 40 feet off Halford Hill. Nobody had ever done that to a hill this old. Somebody was going to see the whole thing. She didn't sound excited. She sounded like someone standing at the edge of a hole they knew they were going to fall into. "I need to slow down here. I need to talk about the way they were lying, because once I tell you, you won't be able to stop thinking about it. I haven't been able to stop. Not for years. Not once. You grow up going to funerals in West Virginia, you learn one thing early: the dead face east. That's how it's done. Always has been. Something about the sunrise, the last day, the resurrection. I never paid much attention to the reason. I just knew that's how you lay a person down. And Halford Hill's graves all faced east, headstones lined up neat, everything pointing the right direction, standard. But the old ones, the ones underneath, the ones that were already old before the town existed, they didn't face east. Every single one of them was turned on its side, facing northwest, toward the same spot. I noticed it the second week. You couldn't not notice it once you'd seen enough of them. It was like a compass needle. Every body, every layer, every century, all of them aimed at the same point. A low rise at the back corner of the cemetery just past the fence. A little hump of ground, maybe 4 feet higher than the dirt around it. The survey crew had already driven stakes through it for the new interchange. You wouldn't look at it twice, just a bump in a field. But thousands of years of dead people were turned toward it. Thousands of years, all facing the same small rise. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself there was a reason, and the reason would be boring, and I'd feel stupid for being scared. And then one evening, after everybody else had gone home, I did something I shouldn't have done. I went back to the graves we'd already opened, the modern ones, the recent ones, the ones with headstones and hymns and families who remembered them. I didn't look at the headstones. I already knew which way the headstones faced. I looked at the bodies. Northwest, every single one of them, every body in that cemetery, every one, going back to the very first grave dug in 1844, was lying on its side, facing that rise. The stones said east. The people said something else. I stood there for a long time. The light was going orange and low through the trees, and the shadows were getting long, and I felt something I'd never felt in my life. Not fear, something older than that, something I didn't have a word for, because I was starting to understand how it was possible. And the answer was worse than not knowing. A town like Halford only ever had 1 or 2 men who dug graves. It was a trade, passed father to son. The same family opened every grave in that cemetery for 150 years. Think about that. The gravedigger prepares the hole before the funeral. The family shows up. The preacher says the words. They lower the box. Nobody climbs down to check. They stand at a filled mound and a stone, and they go home. So one family, one line of men, going back 150 years, had been quietly turning every single corpse in that town to face that rise, and then setting the headstone east so nobody ever knew. And I don't think they could have told you why. I don't think they had words for it. They just did it, the way their fathers did it, the way their fathers' fathers did it. I sat in my truck in that empty cemetery until it got dark. I didn't turn on the dome light. I didn't start the engine. I sat in the dark, and I listened to the nothing. And I was more afraid of that nothing than of anything in my life, because there was no monster in that field. There was no ghost. There was just a fact, something so big and so patient and so quiet that an entire town had kept it without even knowing they were keeping it, without ever saying it out loud, without ever writing it down, since before there was a town, since before there was a state, since before there was a country to put it in. People had been bringing their dead to this hill and turning them to face that rise for thousands of years, and none of them could tell you why. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, the same shake they have now. It started that night. It never stopped. The next morning I found out the state already knew, and they didn't care. The man running the job was named Vance. Charleston guy, golf shirt, the kind of man who smiles at you while he's doing something wrong and expects you to smile back. To Vance, a dead body was a scheduling problem, An ancient burial was something that could shut him down. I never once saw that man touch the dirt. Dana had filed her report, the formal one, the one with the words that are supposed to shut everything down. I won't get into the details, you can look it up if you want, but basically, if you find what she found, the law says you stop, you call people, you wait. It can kill a project for years, which is exactly why the people above us never let those words leave that hill. Vance brought a lawyer and a man from the state office. They went into the field trailer and shut the door. I sat on the bumper of my truck for 4 hours, watching that trailer, watching the shadows move behind the blinds, and I had this feeling in my chest, not dread, not yet, more like watching someone lock a door from the wrong side. When they came out, Vance was smiling. The lawyer was not. The finding had changed. They'd rewritten it. The remains were now something. I don't remember the exact words, but it meant nobody to call, nobody who can stop us. Keep digging. And here's the thing that still makes me sick. Years later, it was easy. It was so goddamn easy. The hill was fenced. The road was gated. Nobody could get in without permission, and nobody was giving permission. The lab results, 2,000 years, older than anything on record, those were private property, contract work. The company stamped them pending and put them in a drawer. And that was it. Done. One signature, one form. 6,000 people erased from the record, and nobody was watching. A minor bypass in a broke county. No cameras, no reporters, no one. Dana came to me that night. She was white, not pale white, like something had gone out of her face and hadn't come back. She told me they'd made her sign the revised report. They reminded her she was a contractor, that her firm had 3 other state jobs pending, that a difficult monitor, that's the word they used, difficult doesn't work in West Virginia again. They took her dates, her notes, her samples. Everything that said this was real, and they marked all of it pending. I asked her what we were supposed to do. She looked at me, and the woman who always had an answer, who always had a plan, who always knew the next right step. She looked at me with nothing in her eyes. "They want us to dig faster," she said, "at night, before anyone makes it a thing." I should have walked away. I didn't. So that's what we did. God help me, that is exactly what we did. They moved us to night shifts, told the crew it was to beat the summer heat. Nobody questioned it, not out loud. You don't question things when the bonus they're dangling is the difference between keeping your house and losing it. And the careful work stopped. The hand digging stopped. The containers stopped. The labels stopped. Now it was machines, around the clock, floodlights on the hills so bright they turned the sky white above the trees, and everybody we pulled out, the Taskers, the Hendersons, the ancient ones with their brown bones and their drawn-up knees, everything in between went into one pit. One mass pit at the new cemetery, mixed, out of order, anonymous, all those people, thousands of them. And now they were going into the ground together like filled dirt, like construction waste, like nothing. 2 men quit. I remember them walking to their trucks without saying a word to anybody. Good men, men who couldn't make themselves do it. The rest of us stayed. We needed the money. Vance had us sign papers. Non-disclosure. I signed mine at 3 a.m. under the floodlights, standing next to a trench full of bones. The pen was slippery in my hand because my palms were sweating, and I kept thinking, I am signing away something I'm never going to get back. And after a few nights, I'll say the true thing, because I'm past the point of lying. You go numb. You have to. You cannot run a machine through 6,000 years of the dead and stay a whole man. It isn't possible. So you stop being whole. You take the part of you that feels things, and you put it somewhere the floodlights can't reach. You drive the machine. You watch the bones come up in the bucket, and you don't think about who they were. You don't think about the fact that every one of them is turned the same way. You don't think about the rise. You don't think about any of it, not until you're in your truck at dawn, driving down the hill. You glance in the rearview mirror and you see the hill behind you in the gray light, and the numbness cracks for just a second, and what's underneath it is so bad you have to pull over. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie in bed with the blinds shut and the room dark, and every time I closed my eyes I saw it. Not ghosts, nothing so simple as that. Just the dirt, the endless layers of it, opening up in the floodlights, the brown bones rolling up in the bucket, all on their sides, all turned the same way, and the rise, sitting there at the edge of the light, untouched, waiting. I started to feel like I was part of something. Not a crime, something bigger than a crime. Something so old there wasn't a word for it. Something that had been kept for thousands of years by people who'd never met, who didn't speak the same language, who couldn't have agreed on anything. And we were ending it, night by night, bucket by bucket. In silence, under the lights. My daughter called somewhere in there. I don't remember what I said to her. She told me later I sounded gone. That's the word she used. Gone. She wasn't wrong. We saved the rise for last. Not on purpose. It was the high point of the hill, so you work inward from the edges. That's how you take a hill down. Standard practice. By the end of August, the cemetery was gone. The headstones were in a pile. The people were in the pit. The hill was cut down to a wide, flat scar with one thing left standing in the middle of it. The rise, the thing they'd all been facing, just sitting there. 4 feet of dirt, maybe 12 feet across, in the middle of nothing but turned earth, under the floodlights, with the excavators parked around it in a half circle. I looked at it that night and thought it looked like an altar, or a grave, or something that was both, and neither. Dana was still on site. They'd wanted to get rid of her, I knew that, but firing the monitor before the dig was finished would have looked like exactly what it was, so they kept her and ignored her, and she stayed. She told me why. She'd decided somebody honest had to see the bottom of it, even if she could never publish, even if she could never tell anyone. Somebody had to see. I wish she hadn't stayed. I wish I hadn't been the one on the machine. But I was. The night we took the rise, Vance wanted it gone by morning. He was already talking about the roadbed pour. To him, it was just 4 feet of dirt. I climbed up into the cab. The floodlights were buzzing. The rest of the crew had gone. Vance didn't want an audience for this part, I think, though he never said so. Just me and Dana and the machines and the lights. The air was warm and still, the way summer air gets in the mountains right before a storm that never comes, and the smell turned earth, and something under it, something mineral, like wet stone deep underground. I put the bucket in. About 2 feet down, I felt something change. Not the resistance was the same. It was the sound. The machine made a different sound, and I can't describe it except to say the ground felt hollow. I stopped. I shut the engine off, and in the silence after the diesel died, I heard something I'd never heard on that hill. Air, moving, cold air, coming up out of the ground like breath. I climbed down with my light and I called Dana over. She was already moving toward me. I think she'd heard it too, or felt it, something. The two of us stood at the lip of what I'd opened, and we looked down, and neither of us said a word for a very long time. I need to say this carefully, because this is the center of the whole thing. This is the part I see when I close my eyes. This is the part that took my sleep and never gave it back. The rise wasn't a mound of bodies. It was the opposite. It was empty. Everywhere else on that hill, every direction, every layer, every century, the dead were packed in tight. Thousands of them, turning and turning in the dirt, all facing the same point. But the rise, the exact spot they were all aimed at, had no one in it. It was a column of clean, empty earth, maybe 12 feet across, going straight down through every layer of burials, through every era, all the way to the bedrock below. A hollow core. I shined my light down into it, and the beam went a long way before it hit bottom. And it was cold. The air coming up out of it was cold in a way that didn't make sense for August. Not cool, cold, with a mineral edge to it, like the draft off the bottom of a deep mine shaft. I stood there, and I felt something give way inside me, not all at once, just quietly, the way a foundation shifts under a house and you don't hear it, but after that nothing is level anymore. Because it wasn't the emptiness that broke me. It was the fact that it had been kept empty. I could see it in the walls of the column, the dirt walls, exposed now under my light. The burials stopped clean at the edge. Every layer, every era, everyone who had ever lived in that valley, they all stopped at the same line, like a border, like a line you don't cross. The bones were pressed in close right up to the edge of that column. And then, nothing, a clean wall of earth. All the way down. For 6,000 years, nobody had ever put a body in the center. They faced it. They surrounded it. They kept it clear. I climbed down into it. I don't know why. I don't know what I was looking for. I went down into that empty column with my flashlight, and I looked at every surface, every wall, every foot of that hole. There was nothing. No tomb, no carving, no bones, no artifact, no marking, no idol, no image, no message, not a scratch on a stone, not one thing left behind to explain what it was, just emptiness. 6,000 years of human beings, people who never met, who spoke different languages, who lived and died and were forgotten 10 times over, who had no way of talking to each other. All of them knew 2 things. Bring your dead here and keep the middle empty. None of them wrote down why, not once, not ever. The knowledge moved through 6,000 years of human hands and was held at the end by no one. It was never taught. It was never spoken. It was just done. The gravediggers of Halford turned every corpse northwest for 150 years. And if you'd asked them why, they would have said, I think they would have said, I don't know. It just felt right. That's the way Pop taught me. That's how it survived, not through words, through hands, through doing, through something in us that's older than language. I stood at the bottom of that empty column, 12 feet of clean earth on every side of me, 6,000 years of the dead stacked above me in the dark, and I felt like I was standing inside something's rib cage. I climbed out. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the ladder. Dana was sitting in the dirt at the edge. She had her hand over her mouth, and she said, through her fingers, the only thing there was to say, "We're the first ones who didn't keep it." Vance came up at dawn. He looked down into the column the way you'd look at a pothole, asked if there was anything in it, anything that would be a problem, anything that would stop the pour. I looked at him, clean golf shirt, coffee in his hand, standing at the edge of something that people had protected with their dead for longer than anything he'd ever known, and all he wanted to know was whether it would cost him money. I told him no. There was nothing in it. And that was true. There was nothing in it. That was the whole point. That was the horrible, gut-sick point. And he couldn't even see it. He told me to fill it and cut the rise flat by noon. I want to tell you I refused. I want to tell you I climbed down off that machine and threw my hard hat at his feet and drove to every newspaper and university in the state and made the world stop and look at what we'd found. That's the version where I'm a good man. Here's what actually happened. Dana had kept copies, notes, photographs, the original dates from the lab, the ones that hadn't been buried in a drawer yet. She put them in my truck that morning, told me she couldn't be the one her name was on too much. But I was nobody, an operator. Maybe nobody would think to silence me. Maybe I could find someone who'd listen. And I sat in that cab, and I looked down into that empty column one last time, and I did the math. Not the noble math, the real math. The math a tired man does at 6 in the morning after 2 months of no sleep. The proof in my truck was a box of papers and some photographs, bones and dirt, and a stack of dates. There was nothing in those pictures that would make a stranger feel what I'd felt standing at the bottom of that hole. You had to have been there. You had to have put your hand on that cold wall and felt the air coming up from the bedrock. You had to have done it, and the people were already gone, already in the pit, mixed weeks ago. The order was broken. The pattern was destroyed. Whatever the thing was, it was never just the hole. It was everyone around it, facing it, holding it, keeping it. And we'd shattered that with machines under floodlights, night after night. Filling the hole wasn't ending anything. It was already ended. I'd just be closing a grave that didn't have a body in it. And I needed the money. That's the truth. That's the ugly, small, ordinary truth of it. And I'm too old to put a better face on it. My house, my truck. What was left of my life. All of it was sitting on the other side of that bonus check. And I'd already done the worst thing. 40 nights of it. 40 nights of feeding 6,000 people into a pit. What was one more hole? So I filled it. I cut the rise flat by noon. We poured the roadbed base the next week. The bypass opened that fall. It really does shave 11 minutes off the drive to the interstate. I did one thing. One small, useless, stubborn thing. When it came time to move Rosie third from the fence, Ruth, 1931 to 1989, I didn't let her go into the pit. I'd told Vance early on that I wanted to handle my mother's relocation personally. Even a man like Vance could understand that, or pretend to. So I dug her myself, by hand, the way I'd promised on the first morning. Careful, slow. I cleaned the dirt off her box with my fingers. I lifted her out like she weighed nothing, and I drove her to the new cemetery alone, and I buried her alone, in a real grave, with her real stone, in the daylight. And as I laid her down, I caught my hands doing something I had not decided to do. I turned her, on her side, facing back the way we'd come, facing the bypass, facing the flat scar where the hill used to be, facing the place under the eastbound lanes where the empty center was buried now, under gravel and asphalt and a road that would never know what it was sitting on. I didn't choose to do it. My hands did it. The same way the grave diggers of Halford had done it for 150 years, the same way people had been doing it for 6,000 years before them, without thinking, without deciding, without being able to explain. It just felt wrong to lay her flat, facing the sky, the way everybody else does it. It felt like leaving her out of something I couldn't name, something that was still going on, even now, even after everything we'd done. So I turned my mother to face a thing that isn't there anymore, a thing I helped destroy, a thing no living person on Earth even knows was real. And that's when I finally understood. Nobody ever needed to teach it. It was never passed down in words. It was never written in a book. It was already inside me, already in my hands, waiting the whole time. It's probably in you too. The bypass is busy now. 40,000 cars a day, the state says. I drive out there sometimes. I park at the overlook and I watch them pass. Every one of those drivers, when they cross the spot where the rise used to be, faces northwest for about half a second. 70 miles an hour. They're checking their mirrors, changing the station, thinking about dinner. Not one of them knows. Not one of them knows that for as long as people have lived in these mountains, every generation laid their dead facing the exact patch of ground their front tires are crossing. Not one of them knows what's under them, what we buried, what we broke. They face it for half a second, and then they're gone, and I'm still here, parked at the overlook. The last one who knows, the last one who felt the weight of it in his hands and understood, too late, what he was holding. 61 years old, hands that shake, a daughter who doesn't call, a mother buried 6 miles from a hole I filled with my own hands, still facing the place where the answer used to be. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't fear, not anymore. It's the loneliness, all those years, that unbroken chain of people holding something too heavy to carry and too important to set down, passing it hand to hand across 6,000 years without a single word. And it ends with me, a tired man on an excavator who needed the money. The line stops here. Whatever it was, whatever they all knew, whatever they were keeping, whatever that empty space in the center of the hill was for, it's under a highway now, and I'm the only one who ever felt the weight of it. My mother faces it. I made sure of that. I just wish I knew what she's looking at.